local board in item 10. And before they do, we have the Mission Bay Kohimarama Residents Association here, and a lady called Wanda is going to come forward and address us. And before we get into this, the Deputy Mayor would like to move the whole discussion about this, and I'm sure somebody else would like to second it. Councillor Newman, thank you very much. So that's on the board. We're in your hands, Wanda Mountford. Welcome.
A very good afternoon to the Mayor and to the governing body. You are aware my name is Wanda Mountford, and I'm actually here representing the Mission Bay Kohimarama Residents Association. I would like to briefly put forward the community's view that there is a genuine need for Tagalad Reserve to be returned to the Aoraki local board's governance. I cannot overstate the community's support for this issue, the community's need for these facilities, and the community's frustration that these public facilities have been locked up and unusable for the past 8 years. Because of the strength of our community feeling about the retention of Tagalad Reserve, our association has undergone a very thorough consultation process over the past 5 years. To accurately gauge the community's stance on this reserve, we have held numerous public meetings, and we've conducted a community survey and petition. We have also engaged an independent consultant to host an open day on this reserve, where they were tasked with amassing independent public feedback on this issue. Our community has made it clearly known that they were always of the view that this green space and its buildings were required, and they are very unhappy it made its way onto Schedule B without community consultation. Numerous needs for these facilities have been identified and detailed in a report that we submitted to Auckland Council in 2022. To highlight just 2 of these needs, firstly, the need for green space. The only reserve in Mission Bay that caters for all abilities is Selwyn Reserve on Mission Bay Beach. This reserve is used by people from all over Auckland and tourists, and it does suffer from gross overcrowding in summer months and weekends and during organised Auckland-wide events. While our residents actually welcome the diverse cultures and diverse range of activities that give Selwyn Reserve its character, they are also frustrated that this regular overcrowding precludes them from using their only All Abilities Reserve for a large part of the year. Whilst Tagalad Reserve could be considered only a pocket park in size, it would provide an easily accessible central green space for the local community to use. Bearing in mind Mission Bay and its neighbouring suburbs are zoned for and are undergoing high densification, the community sees the provision of this green space as very necessary for community use and well-being, both now and in the future. Tagalad Reserve is flat, it has ample parking provided, it has park toilets provided, and it is within a 15-minute walk-in cycle for residents. This makes it very suitable to cater for all ages and all abilities, including those with mobility challenges. The buildings on this reserve are also needed for multiple reasons. As both Kohimarama and Mission Bay do not have a community centre, our residents are required to use neighbouring community centres. However, suitable times and facilities are often not available for our residents. Another important need for the buildings is to provide a community hub for essential community services. For example, our area has one of the highest proportions of older residents across Auckland. These older residents are not immune to the challenges faced by other older people across Auckland, and currently about 10% will be experiencing abuse and/or neglect, and about 20% will be living with loneliness and isolation at a level that is seriously detrimental. We need a service in our area like that of Age Concern, and one of the buildings on this reserve could provide a much-needed eastern hub for a service like that and other community services. From a financial perspective, we are actually very aware that community facilities can no longer be a burden for Auckland Council. We have identified many organisations that are keen to lease or rent both the buildings and green space on a regular basis, and that this income could cover ongoing running costs. We also believe that our current local board members have the ability, expertise and drive to ensure the successful provision of public recreational and service facilities at this site. Just before I conclude, I would also like to point out that it is worth highlighting that Healthy Waters are not in favour of development on this site due to its location in a very active floodplain. And to conclude, we would like to thank our local board for their resolution to take on this site as a local service property, and I would like to urge you all present to remove the non-service status for Tagalad Reserve, to remove this property from Schedule B so it is no longer considered for sale, and to return it to the capable governance of the Ōrākei Local Board. Our community are determined to support this reserve. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and if anyone would like to answer questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Just possibly Wanda will be immediately followed by the local board, so possibly we can hold our questions till we've heard both of you, because you are both speaking in favour of the same thing, as I believe. Is that correct? So hang about, Wanda, and I'll invite Scott to bring his team forward. But thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's moved and been seconded to be received, and all those in favour of receiving, please say aye. Contrary, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're just going to make space for Justine. Angus, why don't you?
There's 2 council seats.
Yeah, take Councillor Watson's seat.
You can keep it, actually.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Please note I made no comment.
Or he could do better and go right up the front. That would be the best solution.
First class. Good answer.
Way above my pay grade.
Your Worship, councillors, thank you for your time given to us today. As you've heard earlier in the meeting by Wanda, the local community strongly supports council retaining Tagalad for community use. As Auckland and our local area intensifies, we need to retain green open space for health and well-being of our communities and our ratepayers. Our local board and community have been advocating for the return of this property since 2016, and our board has made numerous resolutions to that effect. Staff also support the return of Tagalad as a service property to the local board. As Wanda has mentioned, Healthy Waters do not support redevelopment of Tagalad Reserve due to its location in a floodplain and support retaining it in council ownership. Flood modelling of the wider area is underway, although could take up to 3 years, and Tagalad has been identified as a site for potential stormwater management. But the key thing to keep in mind as you reflect on the decision before you is that Tagalad Reserve should never have been removed from local board governance as a service property in the first place. The decision was unilaterally taken by officers with no reference or consultation with stakeholders or the local board. A desktop analysis report was written by officers that indicated the property was not required. It did not appeal to stakeholders or the local board. It never came before the board, and instead officers recommended to the governing body that they hand the property to Eke Panuku for consideration for disposal. The board has always disputed the content of what we regarded as a poor quality report. The community, as Wanda has said, has subsequently commissioned its own independent report at their own expense, and council at more considerable expense redid their own report. I have it here, all 43 pages of it, which came to us in November of last year. Now, I wish to put on record that the decision was taken by past officers, and the officers that are before you today are not to blame for the situation we find ourselves in. In fact, to the contrary, the lot we've been working with have been great. They have worked steadily and professionally, and, acknowledging past stuff-ups, have provided good advice to our board and have made the recommendation to return the property to a local service asset. It's important, councillors, to also realise that a decision not to return has implications for each of you and your local boards, as local boards are allocated governance over local parks for the benefit of the communities they serve. A decision to return Tagalad is consistent with the principles of increased decision-making, which is a policy already approved by the governing body. It's also consistent with the direction proposed in the LTP to enable greater local board empowerment. When it was in Eke Panuku's hands, it was identified as what we'd call a second-rate prospect for selling, Category B. In fact, it was at the bottom of Category B, not low-hanging fruit. Now, why is that? Well, Eke Panuku absolutely knew that the presentation of this property for sale would likely spark a citizens-led judicial review because the community was well aware of the council's processing errors. Eke Panuku were also aware that they would likely receive a challenge from the Melanesian Mission Trust, who had gifted the land to Auckland Council in the first place for recreational purposes. They would likely challenge to have it returned to them, or at least be offered first refusal. And they knew there would be a need to have a revocation of the reserve status part of the land, which requires by law consultation with neighbours and affected stakeholders, and of course the local board, and they knew that was going to be a fraught process. All of these things can be dealt with. You can build in a floodplain, you can revoke reserve status, you can do these things, but it's going to take a long, long time, it's going to take a lot of money, and there's going to be a lot of fireworks. Plus, it's in a floodplain. Councillors, I just want to channel Councillor Stewart's comments. We've been here before by encouraging developers to build on property that's in a floodplain. And at the same time, I'm not sure that it's good practice to have your names associated with selling a property, a council property, to a developer and encouraging them to build on a floodplain when we're doing all this work on making space for water. I also want to reiterate Councillor Fletcher's comments and Councillor Lee's comments. There is reputational risk here. We do not look good. It's not a good look for you guys to be voting to sell a property for developers to put apartments on a floodplain. Our board acknowledges that despite the reserve and its facilities being run down and neglected over the last 8 years, that if the governing body returns Tagalad to the local service property, our local board will be responsible for funding its renewal and refurbishment to enable it to be returned to community use. The board has already set aside budget in the coming year to bring the building back to the condition in which it left us, some $200,000. In conclusion, councillors, we are a process and rules-driven organisation. In this instance, we have not followed the process and we have broken the rules. Now, we don't need to apologise because it's ourselves that are the victims. But we do need to stop perpetrating this situation where we have not performed particularly well as an organisation. In summary, we ask you today to right a past wrong and allow us to look after and develop Tagalad Reserve for our community. Thank you for your time.
Excellent presentation, thank you. And I have questions from councillors.
Sorry, my apologies, Your Worship. I mean, do you want to add anything?
Thank you,
Justine,
Chairman,
sorry.
and just through the Chair, briefly, just to acknowledge all the work to bring this item to you today, and just to note the further staff advice, which is an attachment to the cover report that gives our perspective on many of the aspects that Chair Milne has just covered here. I'm happy to answer any questions from a staff perspective. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Councillor Hills and then and Councillor Dalton have questions from the Planning Committee.
One question for, I'm assuming, Deputy Mayor who'll be moving it. Are you going to change A to support the request instead of consider? Or am I not right on the steps here before we discuss it? Okay. Okay, because I think consider the request is not correct. Okay, thank you. The question I had, and thank you, Chair, and the board for the community for this. I guess my question is more of a bit of advice, but have you spoken to Pēswhiri Kaipātiki or Shore Junction on the shore? Pēswhiri Kaipātiki managed to have a very similar thing happen. They picked up the bowling club in Glenfield and they've spent no council money or local board money. They've actually got a bunch of people like Naylor Love, local businesses to all put in, and they've got a master plan for the site that they're all doing with some support from local board over time. But and same with Shore Junction. I think there was 3 or 4 members of the club left, and now Shore Junction have taken over that site, and it's actually young people who are redesigning and investing in that bowling club as well with no council. So I just think there's some innovative ideas and relationships you could probably build.
Thank you very much, through you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Hills. Yes, indeed, we have. In fact, the Mission Bay Kai Residents Association have been working with them, and Deputy Chair Powery has also been instigating discussions on how we can use this facility. But I do appreciate the input.
The original figure, I think, Pēswhiri Kaipātiki were given was going to be $700,000 to get back to new of council money, and they didn't need any of that. They got volunteer and donations and things, so it's quite good.
Councillor Dalton, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentations. Wanda, yours was really good, so was yours, Scott. I have a question for Justine. I was just reading the report around the costs for the OPEX, ongoing OPEX. Do the local board get a transfer of any funds for that reserve from where it's sitting at the moment? Because anything needs to come out of their existing budgets, from what I understand.
Yes, that is correct. So in recognition of the removal from Schedule B, our advice to the local board has been to accommodate those costs within their existing budget as part of the consideration of the return of this to the portfolio. Chair Milne may have a different view to share. Yeah.
Well, we reckon that's pretty rugged. Sort of reminds me of the consultant who asks to borrow your watch, tells you the time, and then sends you an invoice. You know, I guess we think it's pretty tough that we have an asset removed under less than ideal circumstances from us, and we have to pay to get our own back. Hey, we're not going to fight you to the death on this.
Well, I tend to agree with you, and maybe it's a conversation that can be ongoing with the Deputy Mayor.
We appreciate that.
Just out of curiosity, I was having a look on Google Maps, and I noticed on the corner of Atkin there's a site there, and on Google Maps, if it's still true, it was going to have development on it. What was that site before? It's just a curiosity. Oh, okay.
Just for your interest, Councillor, if you look at a 1 kilometre radius of this particular reserve, there's 403 new units being consented in the last 2 years.
I have sympathy for what's happening out there.
We have real intensification going on, even in these developed suburbs of Auckland.
Yep, it's a perfect reserve for the community. You have my support. Thank you.
We could always sell it to you for $1. Might have solved the problem. Anyhow, I have a moved and seconded recommendation It's quite long, but I've read it carefully and it does seem to cover up for what you're trying to get out of this. So, and I've got a couple of more questions here. Comments. Henderson, there's not enough of these in West Auckland, I think, and he's got a few bins to send you.
No, I was just going to apologise, Chair, because I have to bring up West Auckland again. But last term, I actually got a bit of land in Langholm removed from the sale and had to work very hard to do so because it was in a floodplain. And actually, I just wanted to publicly say the Deputy Mayor was incredibly supportive of that work, and it is, I think, a principle that we should be following, and I'm actually glad to be following it here. So happy to support. So thank you.
Very well done. Councillor Philly.
Kia ora, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. And I had something very similar happen when I was chair of the local board, where we had a park that was put up for sale without being consulted on that. So I totally understand what you're going through and tautoko, the sentiments coming through today. Just a question then, what interaction, if any, did you have with Eke Panuku or others before it was put on that list for sale?
Councillor, we had no interaction before it was on the list, but I met with David Rankin a number of times, and we talked about the process. His attitude was, "Hey, look, I didn't do this. It's not my fault." But he acknowledged the points that I've made in my presentation, that this is a tough sell. And we didn't do the process right, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through. It's not low hanging fruit, and that's why it was well down on list B.
Kia ora, thank you, and I'm supportive. Kia ora.
Here we go. I think we're going to put this. No? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hills.
Oh, sorry, I was confused if we were back in questions or debate, but I'm happy to be in either. But I just wanted a brief comment, and I think it was to what I've spoken to Claudia about this and Councillor Dalton as well, that I think this is another example of how we need to help ourselves get out of the way. This is a really good example of the local board wanting to take responsibility for something. I've seen it happen in the North Shore Ward when Pest Free Kaipatiki said, we want to take this old bowling site, and the first council barriers were, no, it'll cost us way too much, it'll be a burden. But we've actually got a fantastic community asset up there where the community have come together. I actually said, I don't see any way that you'll be able to raise the money for this, to be honest, to the team there. And they just have done it. Community have put money in. People have come and built stuff. Naylor Love have donated all the furniture and, sorry, not the furniture, the wood and the materials. And people have come out of the woods because it was about losing an asset. And I think this is what you're doing here. And I think there will be stormwater purposes you can pick up and work with the Healthy Waters team, probably for good environmental benefit, but also community benefit. So I think sometimes we just need to make it not about money and about how we get the process easier for community and local boards to pick up these things. And it may mean no extra money onto council. Not all the time, but it might mean that. So thank you.
Right. Oh. Councillor Simpson, Deputy Mayor Simpson, sorry.
Your Worship, I was going to keep it brief. I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm just going to make a statement, and I don't want to make it negative against why it's taken you a hang of a long, not you, but why it's taken us collectively as a group such a long time to get here. But I do want to congratulate both the local board and the local community. The local community, to my colleagues, they put on the most amazing event that called everybody in together in support. It was really well done, Wanda, and you did a huge amount of work towards that. So to you and your team, I want to say thank you, because the local board was banging its head against a brick wall, getting nowhere from a council process, and you gave them all the ammunition that they needed to actually finally get it to the point where it is today. Scott, to you and your team, this was well before your time. It happened, and I think you've done an amazing job bringing it to this place. So together with staff supporting it, I'm very happy to move it. I can't sit here and vote against this, having done all the work that we've done last term in the floods, knowing the state of the flood issues in this particular location. So I think it's on each and every one of us to support this and congratulate the local board for all their work and the community to getting it to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Bartley, anyone else want an election speech?
I don't have an election speech. I'm just mindful of other local boards that may be in similar situations and how they're going to be able to come through with what they need to advocate for. That's my question. Like, is there any other local boards in the same situation that perhaps aren't as, I don't know, proactive to take this process? But I also want to acknowledge the Ōrākei local board, that you've got the staff advice that's helped, you've got the community support there, and the fact that we've just come through the floods, and so the importance of the floodplain issue that was backed by Healthy Waters. So I'm happy to support, but I am mindful of what about our other local boards that could be in similar situations?
Councillor, this doesn't set a precedent, and I think that's really important. If you'd asked it as a question, I think Justine could answer that. I think that's a very important statement. Correct, Justine?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I guess that's what we've tried to articulate really clearly in this advice, is the unique circumstance of this situation, and its unfortunate circumstance, of course, but it is very specific to this issue. If local boards wanted to pursue a similar question in other areas, we would need to go to the same level of detail to understand that specific circumstance.
Phil wants to say something, and then Councillor Newman, who seconded it,
have
something. But
I mean,
we do need to sell a few assets, not that they should be dud ones, but at some stage or other, just because it's there, we don't have to save every single piece. This is a good case. I'm quite happy with the presentation. Chief Executive, who is the person who is supposed to be saving some money.
So just to be really clear, staff are supportive of this and party to the recommendation here, so no problem. But just to speak to Councillor Bartley's question, the truth is, I believe there are marginal propositions elsewhere in other board areas, and I think you will need to turn your mind to that. You are going to need, through the back end of the long-term plan process, to turn your minds to the target that is in there for property sales, and that's what drives this process. So you need to look at that, being mindful of the situations that it creates around the region. I'll leave it there.
Councillor Newman? Oh no, have we got Councillor Lee and Councillor Philippina have
I won't take long, Chair.
joined us again?
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I just wanted to say to Scott, and appreciating the diplomatic way that you're presenting this issue. I mean, the truth is that our offices are good, but our planning isn't always right, and sometimes a good case is presented which actually corrects an error. It won't be the first time, and it possibly won't be the last either. It would be remiss of me if I wasn't reflecting on 2 Arkini Court in my ward, which was identified as, yes, we can dispose of that. Actually, when it went through the hearings process, it was identified it needed to be retained as a reserve, and it was. And we took it off the schedule because actually the advice and the decisions that we took were wrong. The local board and the community were right. I am sorry that it took a hearings process and all of the pain and all of the angst and the uncertainty over many, many months, a year basically, to try and come to that conclusion. I hope that the decision that's taken here will provide some certainty to that community, and I can commend you for it. Thank you.
Councillor Lee from Waiheke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to congratulate the community and the Aoraki Local Board for its leadership in this long battle. I want to thank the officers for the support of this resolution, and I want to thank the Deputy Mayor Simpson and Councillor Newman for the motion. I would add, though, that when we are talking about asset sales, particularly the sale and effective destruction of public parks, we don't call it recycling. Recycling has redemptive connotations, and selling a park for development does not. So apart from that concern, I fully support the recommendation or the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Filipaina, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This part is just for Justine. Justine, can you tell me the special circumstances that necessitated the change and support? I know there's some feedback, I can actually hear it myself, so it might be your microphone, Mr. Mayor. So Justine, what were those special circumstances that allowed the staff to change mind? Because I think that will be relevant to the other local boards. Kilda.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. As noted in the memo, which is supplementary to the cover report, our team worked with a number of departments across the organisation to bring this advice together. And I think it's the combination of those aspects which is important and perhaps wasn't as cohesive, I guess, in earlier advice. The stormwater aspect, which has been discussed quite a lot, was only identified relatively recently and is pretty fundamental to the recommendation that this site is retained in council ownership. But importantly, Healthy Waters have advised that a community use is compatible with that stormwater requirement. So those two aspects, I guess, with the information we have at the moment, do suggest that ongoing council ownership is the preference.
Alf, you've got your mic off. Hello.
Yep, sorry, my bad. Justine, who is the person that I can contact to get a list of the properties in the Manukau ward that are on the list for sale?
Can I follow up with that name after the meeting, if that's okay, Councillor?
I think if I might intervene, I think what we will do is, as I suggest in relation to the long-term plan, revisit that list, which effectively, and in fairness to Eke Panuku, is the list that we give them that they are working from. So that it amounts to your instruction to them around the sales. So I think we'll bring the list back into that process.
Yeah, Phil, if you could get that list in the Manukau ward for those from Eke Panuku, or I'll get hold of David Rankin to send me the list. Kia ora.
Katie, bye.
Okay, I'm going to put the motion. It's been moved, seconded, argued about, talked about, questioned about and supported. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, I believe you are now in charge of the Tegalead reserves.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, councillors. Whatever else you do today, and you've got a hell of a day, you can go home tonight knowing that you've done a good thing and the right thing. So.
Actually, you're preempting. We've got a really good one coming up, mate. So on the basis of that, you better invite me to the opening booze up. Righto. We are now at items 11, 12 and 13. With regard to item 11 and item 12, we did get a reply from the government about the GST back on rates. It was a weak no. But I reckon most Aucklanders would disagree with that. The government clearly recognises we need more funding tools, so I'll keep on about them. And it was, after all, the idea that came from the government very expensive report into the future of local government. However, I think that seeing as the next three things are procedural, I'm prepared to move all three items 11, 12 and 13, being the forward work and programme of committees of the government body, the summary of the governing body information memoranda briefing, and the summary of the confidential decisions and related information released into the opening. Do I have a seconder prepared to do that? Councillor Foley said she would do that, and she's a lawyer, so I'm probably on safe grounds here. All of those in favour of that grouping of 11, 12 and 13, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary? No. There are no extraordinary items, number 14, that I'm aware of. A number item, 15, allows us to go into a secret lunch to exclude the public for the ones which will be after lunch, which are confidential, local water were done well, and a city rail link oversight development. So there are plenty of reasons for this one to go into confidential, and I'm not at all keen on normally doing that, so I will move it can go into confidential, and the second will be Councillor Williamson, who has immense experience in this as well. All those in favour of that, please say aye. To the contrary. Okay, we are now going to break till 2 o'clock on the dot. That means 2 o'clock, not 5 past. And we're going to come back for one of the most important things we've ever done. So thanks very much for that. I look forward to seeing you all at 2 o'clock. And